Welcome to the Denver Gazette Sports Podcast, Broncos Reaction Edition. I am your host, Chris Schmedicke, and we got plenty to unpack, so I am joined by Chris Thomason. Chris, how you doing today?
Hey, doing fine. Thanks for having me, Chris.
All right, Chris. So, like I said, there's a lot to unpack with this game. Broncos follow the Jets 31-21 at home. Broncos dropped to 1-4, have not won at home yet this season, even though they had three pretty winnable games at home. Sean Payton era not off to a great start, we'll just say. So first, Chris, I just want to ask you, you're in that locker room every day. You're in that locker room yesterday. It has to be pretty down.
Yeah, it's just a case of kind of the same old. I mean, at every home game this season, we've been hearing the same refrain that we can't finish games or we play just one good half, whether it might be offensively or defensively. And then you couple that with all the Hackett stuff, the Nathaniel Hackett stuff, and you see the Jets going wild on their sideline and hugging the former coach. And it all kind of stems back to Sean Payton's comments in July, which served as quite an unnecessary distraction for this game.
Yeah, it was a very emotional game between two 1-3 teams. Like it was there was a lot of emotion in that game. You could see it. So let's talk about the whole Sean Payton, Nathaniel Hackett thing a little bit. We've talked about his comments before that he said in July it was the worst coaching job and all this. So Nathaniel Hackett's offense, like the one thing the Jets had going for them was Breece Hall, and they were going to be able to run the ball. And the Broncos did not seem to be interested in stopping that at all. Was that just bad scheme? Is it Vance Joseph again? Is it just that the Jets were just better?
Well, that's certainly been a bugaboo against the run the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks in a row. I mean, it really started when the Dolphins ran for 350 yards 2 weeks earlier. Nobody really pinpointed in the Broncos locker room any exact reasons, although Justin Simmons said losing DJ Jones in the first half with a knee injury certainly played a factor. And I agree with that because that the Jets went wild in the run game. They had 150 or so yards rushing in the second half, and DJ Jones wasn't out there. But overall, you would have thought the defense would be stronger, and it was for the first half. I mean, the Broncos got back Justin Simmons. He'd missed 2 games due to injury. They got back Josie Jewell, who had missed 1 game due to injury and a bulk of another. They got back Frank Clark, although he only played 11 plays after missing 3 games, and got back Mike Purcell. So Purcell, did what he could when Jones went out. So the defense was better for a half. There's no doubt they were solid in the first half, but then they, like the proverbial finger in the dike, it all just came unleashed in the second half.
So, there's a lot of Sean Payton talk now, and he has an ego. He's, he runs his ship the way he wants to run his ship. And there's a lot of talk of if this actually works in the modern NFL. I mean, I know you see him every day and you don't want to say too much and all that, but is this team really responding to him, I guess is my question.
Well, for starters, on the Hackett thing, I mean, he said the day after that he was going to reach out to Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett. And Hackett said in his press conference last week that he never heard a word from him. So, I mean, Sean Payton could have done way more damage control than he did, and he should have reached out to Hackett. And he never even would mention Hackett's name leading into the game, and even after the game when I asked him about this saga, and he pretty much just said Robert Saleh and his staff. I mean, he wouldn't say anything about Hackett specifically. So that was interesting. That whole situation could have been handled better after everything went crazy in July with the USA Today interview. But back to Sean Payton. Yeah, I mean, obviously his position is solid. I mean, he said, I'd be disappointed if we don't make the playoffs. Well, that's probably not going to happen, but he probably has come to the realization that this is a much bigger rebuilding project than he had imagined it would be.
Are the Broncos, though, kind of stuck in the middle, though, with the rebuilding stuff? Because now the trade deadline's in a couple weeks, and we can talk about that in a minute. But they've got big money players on this team, and the only winless team now in the league is Carolina, I think. So, but, they're heading for a top 5 pick unless something really changes. So, do they have a $250 million quarterback still, which, so, are they kind of stuck in the middle?
Well, it's key that you mentioned that they have their first round pick. So unless they were to trade it, they haven't had one the last 2 years. So that's a big benefit. And the next 3 games, they've got the Chiefs twice and they've got the Packers, and that's before the trade deadline. So unless something crazy happens in terms of a turnaround, I would think there'll be sellers at the trade deadline. They got some high-priced guys who might not factor into the team's future. Cortland Sutton has a huge contract number next season, and he's not putting up great numbers. Jerry Jeudy's got a big number next season, but he's still, you can get more in a trade for him, but he still, I think, has a higher ceiling than Cortland Sutton. So maybe you want to hang on to him. But, Frank Clark, we mentioned they've already ridded themselves of Randy Gregory, and Frank Clark only played 11 snaps yesterday. So who knows? He's another guy that could be on the trading block. So we'll just have to see.
I can't imagine Frank Clark's thrilled with being here. I don't know if he may regret that signing a little bit.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see what he says this week. He's going back to Kansas City, and his first interview he gave when he came to Denver was, there was no rivalry. We didn't consider it a rivalry with the Broncos when we were with the Chiefs. The Chiefs, of course, have won 15 games in a row in the series. You admire Frank Clark for his honesty, but that'll be interesting to see, what he says this week as he goes back to Kansas City, where he won 2 Super Bowl rings, and he's with a team now pretty much going nowhere.
So let's talk offense a little bit. Completely no-showed for most of the second half. I think they had 1 yard or something like that going into the fourth quarter. Jaleel McLaughlin continues to be the strange one to me, because you had one of the stories we had today about how he touched the ball 5 times in the second half, or not even that many. How many times?
4 carries in the second half, 1 catch. He had 5 carries for 60 yards, I believe, at halftime. He only got 4 more touches in the second half, and he had 2 catches for 23 yards and a 12-yard touchdown in the first half, and then 1 catch for minimal yardage in this, maybe 8 yards in the second half. Yeah, and Sean Payton did say after the game that he kind of blamed himself for getting away from the running game, but you kind of wonder, what is it going to take for Jaleel McLaughlin to get 10 carries in a game? The week before he had 7 for roughly 72 yards against Chicago, and now Javonte Williams is out and he still can't get 10 carries. So that is rather interesting.
Yeah, they only had 22 as a team, and 7 of those were Russ. So, they did but it's weird that they did abandon the running game, because they weren't really down. They were down 24-13, but that was the only time they were really down by more than 1 score. And they just, I don't know, was it just a bad offensive game plan in the second half? Nothing seemed to work.
Yeah, and then they resorted to trickery with the double reverse, which when they really didn't have to. That was an odd play call. You had Samaji Perine pitching the ball on a double reverse. There's a lot of technical things that went on in that play, and that just didn't seem very necessary, and that was a key lost fumble for him there.
It almost seems like Mims expected him to hand it off to him and not pitch it.
Well, he said after the game the design was for a flip. That's the word he used, was flip. So, they obviously worked on it in practice. So, I'm sure he expected whatever they worked on for that to happen. The problem was, and Samaje did take the blame, that he threw it high.
Okay. Okay. So a little bit, and I'm sure you saw this at the game. It was definitely on TV. Is Peyton got on Russ pretty good about that fumble at the end? Do you think there's anything there? Or is that just coach quarterback stuff?
You know, I'm sure that will come up more later, but I mean, part of it, I'm sure, is a coach who was, I mean, that lost the game. The game was over, and here's a coach who just suffered a devastating loss because he pretty much has a lot of egg on his face with the comments he made about Hackett, and then Hackett comes in and his offense gets 407 yards in the win. So I'm sure a lot of that was just, Peyton just infuriated that he lost this game.
So, they're not going to be making any, a lot of calling for Vance Joseph's job continues on social media. They're not going to do anything this week. I mean, they're playing in 4 days. But do you think if they get embarrassed on Thursday night, which is a possibility, I mean, the Chiefs are 10.5-point favorites as of this morning. That number could go up. Are there changes when they have those 10 days off?
We'll have to see, obviously. I mean, there's a trade deadline, and obviously that's a fixed date where they have to potentially move players. There's obviously no fixed date on coaching changes. I mean, we'll just have to evaluate it. And, I mean, what's in Sean Payton's head regarding that, I can't really say. But at least after the Miami debacle, there's been some flashes of good defense played. I mean, they played well in the second half at Chicago, played well in the first half against the Jets, and it's just kind of mystifying how they can't put a full game together, or at least through 2/3 or 3/4 of a game of good defense.
It's crazy to think that they're a 21-point comeback. If they don't do that, they're 0-5 and they lose to the. I mean, things are not great. So you talked about DJ Jones getting hurt. Any other big injuries out of the game?
Not that I'm really aware of at this juncture, but it's a short week, and sometimes guys get banged up and they play through it, and then they're hurting the next day, and they might not have enough time to recover. So the interesting thing is later today we'll get an estimated injury report because the Broncos have to put one out in advance of Thursday's game.
I want to flip back to Hackett real quick. I understand his players rallying around him and all of that, but the notion that I know you weren't covering the team last year, but the notion that the Broncos kind of did him dirty, I don't understand, because he was 4-11 and the team was a mess. So, I mean, I know kind of players say that and they kind of use that as a rallying point, but from what you've known and what you've seen and heard, like, you don't think the Broncos really did Hackett dirty in any sense, do you?
Well, yeah, again, I wasn't here last year. I mean, they let him go, certainly paid off the bulk of his contract, and the guy who was ripping him, Sean Payton, of course, wasn't around last year. So, yeah, but, players and teams are going to do that. They're looking for all the motivation that they can, looking for bulletin board material, and they'll twist things around if needed. And I mean, you've seen the videos of the Jets before the game,
using
it as a rally cry. And I mean, it all stems back to July. There was absolutely no reason for Peyton to make those comments, and he actually got a little fortunate, one would think, heading into the game, because he didn't have Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Rodgers was quite active on social media yesterday, trumpeting up Hackett's win. Can you imagine if there was a healthy Aaron Rodgers going against that Broncos defense yesterday? So Peyton, lucked out. He didn't have to face Rodgers, and it still was bad.
Yeah. I saw some people say the Jets could have put up 50 if Rodgers was playing, and they were probably right, because there were some guys open in the passing game. Wilson just didn't hit them. And All right, so let's flip the script to the Chiefs, who they play in 4 days at Arrowhead, a place that even the best Bronco teams have not had success. Like I said earlier, Chiefs are 10.5-point favorites. The Broncos have lost 15 straight to the Chiefs. Not a lot of positives going in this game, Chris. Do you see any?
Can I think about it for 3 days?
Yeah.
And I'll let you know. But yeah, they've lost 15 straight to Kansas City. I believe the NFL record for most consecutive losses to one foe is 20. The Buffalo Bills
Yes.
never beat the Miami Dolphins throughout the entire 1970s. So if need be, in about 2 years, I'll be calling up members of those Bills and Dolphins teams. But yeah, they have the Chiefs twice in the next 3 weeks, and it's going to be very difficult for that streak to be stopped shy of 17.
Is there a recipe for the Broncos if they actually decide to commit to the run where they just keep the ball out of Mahomes' hand?
Well, you're saying commit
Is that
to
a recipe the
now?
Broncos could do? Yeah.
You mean try to mount a running game?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what Peyton wants to do. I mean, in the first half, Sunday, it looked exactly like Peyton's blueprint for what he wanted to do. Keep the ball on the ground and, with some timely passes. And they're up 13-8 at half. It should have been more if Marvin Mims doesn't muff that punt, which gave him an easy field goal, and Wilson got intentional grounding in the end zone. So that was 5 points right there for the Jets. But yeah, it looked like what Peyton wanted to do in the first half. And then he, by his own admission, got away from it in the second half. I mean, sure, they'll try, but you're going against a different caliber team, Kansas City, than the New York Jets. So if Mahomes is going up and down the field and they're way behind in the second half, so much for the running game.
Okay, my last question about the Chiefs is, will you seek out an interview with Taylor Swift?
She has not returned any of my texts.
Okay, all right. Well, she wasn't at the Minnesota game yesterday, I guess, but I feel like she will probably be there in Kansas City on Thursday night, so the whole Amazon Prime audience can see her, and and I'm sure, I don't know if she'll be seeing a good game. I don't think we'll be that way. All right, Chris, thanks for coming on with me. Make sure everybody subscribes to this podcast on Apple or Spotify. Make sure to read Chris's stuff, the reaction, all the stuff from last night's game. And then Sean Payton talks in about half an hour or so. He probably won't say much. That's why we record before then. But Chris, any stories you've got upcoming that you want to plug?
Well, I've got an interesting one coming up in a few days, but I'll just wait until our readers see it in a few days.
All right.
How does that sound?
There's the ultimate tease from Chris there. All right, Chris, again, thanks for coming on, and we'll probably talk Friday after the Thursday game. And look for all your stuff on denvergazette.com, and we will talk to you later this week.
Great. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thank you.